Alright, so welcome to a new Bitwig video, and in this one we need to talk about the tools, the ones that we have right here. Now this one is going to be the first one of a series I will release in the next couple of weeks, talking about working with audio and MIDI clips. So if I don't start with the basics, which is this, where am I going to start, right? Okay, so let's just begin. So you already know that you can go right here and select the different tools with your mouse. Now, at the right side, every single tool has a number assigned to it. So if I go right here, I know that if I use my computer keyboard, I can go to 1 and select the arrow tool. But if I do 2, I'm going to be changing it to the time select. So I don't need to manually go right there and just change it with my mouse. I can do it with my computer keyboard and toggle between the different options. Also, if you don't like this, you can do always right click and you can instantly select the different tools wherever you are. And there's one more thing. If I go and maybe stand right here, it doesn't matter. But if I go right there and maybe select the knife tool, and we can see that I have the knife tool because I pressed the number 5. If I long press a different number, it's going to switch to that tool. And then when you release that key, it's going to go back to the tool you had before. So right now I'm standing on the number 5, the knife tool. So if I go, maybe I want to get an arrow. Okay, so I'm going to go to the number 1. I'm going to press and long press. I'm still holding that. And notice that, we have the arrow tool. And I'm going to release it in 3, 2, 1, and it goes back to the knife. And if I do the pen, which is the number 3, I'm going to press, long press, I'm going to get it. And when I release it, it goes back to that one. Then all of these are just, tiny little things that maybe you need to know, and they will help you just to move easier and to move faster on Bitwig. Alright, so let's talk about the different things we can do with the different tools. So the first one is going to be the pointer tool. So this one is a kind of almost do-it-all kind of a tool, and we can do a lot of things. So with this tool, we can select clips just like this. I know that this is obvious, but again, I just need to cover this. So I can select different clips or just go to different parts on the arranger. And if I create new clips like this, I just can go right there, do shift, and while I'm holding shift, I can select multiple clips. I can select different clips like this and just, do delete or backspace and just delete, the different clips that we have available. Another thing that we can do with the pen tool, we can go right there. Maybe I want to create some automation with the volume. Well, there you go. With the arrow tool, you just can create different points on the timeline right here on the automation. And just, move the points around. Now, if I do something like this, if I go to an empty spot and I drag it, I can select different points, but this feature belongs, and for now, I'm just going to erase or just eliminate that. And this tool belongs, you can see it belongs to the time select tool more than the arrow tool. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Now, another thing that you can do, you can click on empty areas, and this will create a new clip for you. Maybe with audio, this is not so useful, but it's really useful when you're working with MIDI. So the arrow tool is like a chameleon. You can do a lot of things with the same tool. And maybe you're starting with Bitwig and it's just a little bit confusing. So this is just how it works. When you're standing on the arrow tool, when you go at the upper part of each clip, you can select the clip and then move it around and do a bunch of other things. But then when you go right here in the center, you get a different tool. So this is the time select tool. It's going to be this one, the time selection tool. And we can do a bunch of things with this. We're going to talk about that tool. But that's why, you get with the same tool, you get 2 for the price of 1. You could just select things, drag them around, do different stuff with the arrow. And then right here, when you go inside clip or maybe on center, you can just, use the time select. And on top of that, maybe if you go right there, you just can lower the volume or go up in volume. So the arrow is like a chameleon. You can do a lot of things with just one tool. And all the different tools, they function something like that. They give you something very specific that belongs to that tool, but then you can do some other things with it. Right, so note aside, you need to learn about the cursor and the playback. And this got nothing to do with this, maybe with the tools, but it's something that you need to know. So let me just maybe go right there. So when we are using this tool, when we go right here, notice that we get the time select tool and we have a white line. And then at the top, we have a blue kind of a play. So this is the playback head. This means that if you do play, it's going to start playing back from within this part. Now, when you're here and you select maybe right there, you go maybe here and you click it, it's going to put the cursor right there and the playback head right there where the cursor is. So you can go whatever you are on the timeline and whatever you click it, it's going to start playing it from there. If I go maybe here, right there, it's going to start playing it there. Now, there's a difference because when you go to the timeline to right here, where you have right here at the top, and I click it right there, is the cursor stays there, the white line stays there, but the playback is changing to whatever you're selecting. It's just a little bit different. Another thing that you need to know is that if you're working with many clips or several clips, when you go right there and select the clip, there's no more cursor and the playback is going to go to the beginning of the clip. Right, so with the arrow tool, you can do things like, for example, go right here at the very top and just making the clip shorter. And there's one more thing that we need to learn, and I'm going to be releasing a video about this, understanding how clips and audio events works, because notice that we are making this clip shorter, but the audio right here is much longer. So what is going on right here? And then you have a track thing going on, and now we can see it's short, but we can see it's big right here. So there's a world of difference between the container that we have right here and the different tracks. I'm going to be explaining this on the upcoming, maybe the next one, the next video I'm going to be releasing on Bitwig. For now, we're going to stand right here. So we can go right there at the top, and we can just make the clip longer, or we can just make it shorter. And if we go right there at the bottom, we are going to be looping that clip. So you can do some other things with your arrow tool when you select a clip. And these are things that you need to commit to memory. So you could duplicate an event. You click, you drag. Of course, you can change positions, but maybe that's not what you want to do. You just want to copy paste it. So for now, I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger, just like this, so we can see it on the screen. I'm going to be grabbing this. I'm clicking, holding, I'm dragging. And what I want to do, I want to copy. So I'm going to be doing Control. When I do Control, notice that the mouse changes and we have a plus icon. This means that you're duplicating this event. And for now, I'm just going to select this. And if you want to delete it, you do backspace and it's going to delete it. And a lot of the things that we are doing, you do get a reference right here at the bottom when you start doing this right there at the bottom, right here. And if I start dragging, some options are going to be changing and telling you, it's telling you right there, you can copy, disable snapping, and so on and so on and so on. So you need to take a look at the bottom part and, learn all the things that you can do when you do some actions. All right, so let's say that I want to modify this one and I want to make a copy, but I want to make a copy of the altered clip. So I'm going to do some fades. We're going to be talking about fades in a different video. So I want to make a copy of this. So when you click and drag, what you can do instead of doing Control and just, duplicating the event, what you can do is you can drag and you can do Alt instead. And instead, it's going to bounce the clip. Notice it says bouncing. So it's just like now you have two separate audio events. You have two separate clips and they're different. This one is one and this is a different one. And this is the processed one that we did right here. If we go right there at the bottom, you have access to different options. So you can have to the project panel. You can go to sections and you see the files that are flowing within your project. And now we don't have one. We have two. We have the other one that we created by bouncing it. I'm going to delete it. And remember, it's going to be dragging. And when you drag, you do Alt and it's going to bounce it. So notice that when you make a selection, maybe select a clip and you drag it, by default, wherever you go is going to snap it to the grid. Or actually, whatever you do is going to snap to the grid, not just dragging. So this is by the default behavior, and it's because your snap to grid is it's enabled. And if you're wondering, because again, maybe you're starting, what's the grid? It's the lines that you have right here at the back. And if you want to disable this because you don't like it, right here at the bottom, you see this icon? This is the snap to grid. And for now, right now it's on. So this means that if I go right there and just, move it around, it will always snap to the lines. If you want to disable this, you need to go to your keyboard, do the letter S, and it's going to, turn it off. And I'm just going to my keyboard and pressing the letter S. You can, of course, go right there to, the control, to the icon and click it and disable it. Now, the thing is that sometimes you want this all on all the time. So when you're dragging, what you can do right now, it's snapping, I can hold the shift. I'm going to hold the shift in 3, 2, 1. I'm holding. So what I can do, I can just move the clip freely without snapping. And when I release the click, because I'm holding the click as well, the left click, I'm going to release it and it's not snapping to the grid. And this is because we are holding the shift. So one more thing that you need to know before we switch to the time selection tool is that you can do a lot of other things. And this video will be very long if I start covering all of them. So if I select the clip right there, you can do a right click and you will get a bunch of options of all the things that you can do. On this one, you can do content scaling. On this one, you will be working with fades. You will be slicing, to the drum machine. So you can do a million things. I cannot cover all on a single video. I'm going to be releasing, a bunch of videos for this. But when you do something, whatever you do, if you select this, it's going to tell you, dude, you're working with a clip, and you have right here, you have a visual reference. So you can go right there and see all the things that you can do when you select the clip. If I go right there and select a part of this, right there, notice it changes. It says time right now. I can go right there to time and I can see all the things that I can do when I work with the time. All right, so let's talk about the next one. It's the time selection tool. It's going to be that one. Now, the ones that hold more functions, or we can do a million things, are the pointer and the time selection. The other ones are just a little bit easier to understand. So I'm going to be standing right here on the time selection tool. So this one shares functions and a lot of the things we already covered with the pointer. But with this one, the purpose of this one is that we can make a selection in time of different things or just one little thing. So if I start right here, I'm gonna be dragging. So I'm gonna be selecting this amount of things we can do, this part in the timeline and all the things that are inside. But we can also go right there and I can go to the other channel. And now we have a MIDI channel, MIDI instrument. I don't have an instrument, I just have a MIDI clip, but we can select the range and select different channels or different events. Now you can still go right there and just maybe select a tiny little part. And remember that you can scroll and just go right there and maybe, again, just select a very tiny part. So, okay, let me just put myself right here. So when we make a selection, we can do a lot of things. For example, if I select this part of the clip, notice that you have a white line where it starts and the white line where it's going to be ending. So if I copy this, if I click on this one, notice I get a hand. Let me just do it again. If I get a hand and I click it and hold it, I'm going to be dragging that selection. And this is the main point of all of this. You're just making a selection and then you're going to be doing something with it. So by dragging, what you can do essentially is going to chop that part and then you can just maybe put it on a different place. Let me do it again. I can even go maybe to a different channel and just put it right there. But you're just chopping that part and maybe putting it on someplace else. What if you don't want to chop it, right? Maybe you don't want to do this. Maybe you want to copy. Well, in this case, you're just going to need to select it and you're going to need to do control. So I'm going to be holding the control. I'm holding it right now. I'm going to release the mouse. And now it's not chopping, it's just making a copy of that selection, of the time selection. And just like we did before, but with the mouse, remember we could bounce it? Well, this is the same thing. I'm making a selection of something. I'm going to be dragging. I'm going to be maybe putting it right here. It doesn't matter. And in this case, I'm going to be doing Alt. And it says bouncer, ranger, time, whatever, it's bouncing. So if we go to the files, we can see that now we have two different files, the bounce one and the other one. All of these functions, we can still do them, by using the arrow function. But they belong, and you need to remember this, these functions belong to the time selection tool, not to the pointer tool. So I can go right there and do the same thing on MIDI. I just can, drag it and just make a copy. We can do the same thing with it right here. We could even bounce it. Now, right there, I just have no bounce. Now I'm going to be going right there. I'm going to do Alt, and this one is going to bounce the eraser time. So if I had an instrument, and you know what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it right now. So I will bring the polysynth. It doesn't matter. It's just, I'm going to be putting an instrument right here. Now it's going to be a little bit loud, and I'm going to go to the beginning and just play the clip. That's the clip. It doesn't matter. So what we need to remember right here is that we can bounce this. So if I go right there and just click it and drag it and do the Alt to bounce, this is going to be bouncing to audio whatever we had on the instrument. So right now we have that clip, we can just, we can go right there and just play. And we are going to be listening whatever we bounced from the MIDI clip. A really, really great tool. All right, so let me just close this. It's a little bit, distracting. So I'm going to go back to the snare one. And maybe I'm going to be doing the time selection tool, but, we can still do it with the arrow. What you can do, go right here, make a selection. And when you make a selection, you can do Control, you can do Shift. And I'm holding the Control and holding the Shift. And I'm going to press the letter P. So when you do that, it's going to create a silence. It's going to split it right here and add a silence right there. But notice that this one, it's not deleting anything. If I go right here to this one and I just kind of join this, it's just pretty much the same thing. So what you're essentially doing is just adding a silence of this proportion. So it's Control, Shift, and P, and there you go. So let me just go back. So what you can do, you can duplicate your selection. And instead of duplicating like we do with the arrow tool, where we go right there and we do Control D to, duplicate the whole clip, we can do it with the selection tool as well. So maybe I just want to maybe select this part. And what I want to do, I want to duplicate this. So I'm going to be doing Control, I'm going to do Shift, and I'm holding, and now I'm going to be pressing the letter D. And this is going to duplicate that, but it's going to do it within the actual clip or the actual selection. So it's going to duplicate it and put it next to whatever we selected. And just by doing this, you can get very interesting sounds. So, right? So, yeah, you can do a lot of things. You just need to use your imagination. So let me just go back to, the original clip. So what if you want to chop some parts, right? So remember, you can select whatever you want. And if you want to chop it, I'm going to be doing Shift and I'm going to do it backspace. Now, if I do backspace, it's just going to delete it. But now we have an empty spot right here, right? Which is maybe not that good. Maybe you want to delete this part and join this section along with this section. So on this one, what you can do is hold the Shift and then do backspace, and it's going to delete the selection and because it's going to move whatever you had right here and join it to the other one. All right, so let me go back. So we can do more things. Notice all the things that we can do. Maybe what I want to do, I want to slice, I want to split, and we could easily do it with the knife tool, but we can do it with the time selection tool, right? So what I want to do, I want to slice it. So you could do Control and E, and it's going to slice your selection. Now, let me just go right here. Now, maybe you noticed, maybe you didn't when we did this, slicing. Maybe I'm going to be slicing this. What we are doing, we are using the knife tool, but we are, using it along with the time selection tool. But you can avoid thinking that the time selection tool can also, split. So we are using some of the functions that we do with the knife tool. So like I've told you before, all of these tools, they share functions. And in this case, we are just making a selection just to slice something, right? Which makes sense, but sometimes you just don't want to make a selection. You just want to put yourself right here and maybe chop this clip onto different parts. Well, that you can do it with the time tool. I'm going to be standing and putting the cursor right here. So I'm not doing anything. So now if I do the same thing, Control and E, still gonna go right there and just slice it. So now it's just, we are using it as a knife tool. But the difference is that we need to do Control E, that's all. With the other one, just going and slicing is much easier. But we can do the same thing we can do with the knife tool that we will be discussing in a minute. Now, always remember that when you're working with each tool, maybe I'm going to be selecting some here. It says time right there at the top. You have a lot of options to do different things like insert silence and a lot of things, Shift Control Shift P is what we just, just covered. But yeah, you always need to check this option right here, or maybe do a right click and see what else you can do. Now, you have some other functions within this. They're really, really cool. For example, I can go right there to the center of the clip, and when I do Alt, I'm getting this icon, like an arrow going to the left and an arrow going to the right, and then we get some brackets. So I can move the clip within, we have inside the container. Now, the thing is that if I start explaining what the F is happening right now, I'm going to be diving or going off topic because this belongs to a different topic, which is working with containers in clips and audio events and all the things that we have right here, which is a thing that I'm going to be discussing on the next video about this series. But you can do Control and just, adjust whatever it's inside the clip. One more thing before we go to the next one. When you're standing on an empty section and you get the time selection tool, when you do Alt, it's going to be changing to a plus. I'm pressing the Alt key. What you can do on this one is a rectangular selection. And maybe you're wondering, okay, so why do we get this one? Well, the thing is that sometimes you're standing or you're using your time selection tool. If I drag it, you're going to be selecting a time range in time. You're not selecting the clips that we have behind the selection. So by doing control, the rectangular selection is going to let you select multiple clips. That's the main purpose. So when we make a selection, that doesn't mean that you cannot adjust your selection. If you go to the lines, notice that you get an icon, and this icon means that you can adjust your selection and just make it better, right? Let me, made a mistake right there. So yeah, you can just adjust your selection. Now, there's a downside to this, but there's a fix. Right there, when you move your selection, it's snapping to the grid. You can actually see that it's snapping to the grid. What if you don't want to do this, right? Maybe you just don't want to. So what you can do, while you're dragging, right now it's snapping. Maybe I'm going to go to this because it's going to snap right there. I can move it, and if I do shift, it's going to disable the snapping so I can freely move it or adjust it. So I'm going to leave it right there. So it's going to stay right there. Now, everything that we are doing right now, remember, you can still do it with MIDI clips. Okay, so let's talk about what we can do with the pen tool. And this is a very simple tool. The most complicated ones, I wouldn't say complicated, but we can do a lot of things, is the pointer and the time selection. The other ones are pretty simple. Now, the pen tool has two main functions. The first one is that you can draw and you can create a clip. I know it's some stuff, but it's a very useful thing. So let's say I want to create a MIDI clip, right? So I'm going to stand right there. And I can go to the arrow tool and I can just double click right there. And it's just going to create a MIDI clip for me. And we know that works. But maybe I just want to create a clip of a very specific proportion. So the pen tool can draw. You can just go there and you can draw whatever clip, and just adjust the size, whatever size you want. And you can do it with the pen tool. Now, maybe you're thinking, okay, I'm on the arrow tool. Why do I need to go right there, select the other one, and then do this? Remember, you can do this by just going and tapping the number 5 or 4 or 3 very easily with your computer keyboard. So if I want to select, I'm going to go to number 1, select it. If I want to draw something, I just draw and go back to 1. Now, the thing is that sometimes when you're learning, if you're starting with this, just kind of introduce or just commit all of this workflow to memory. It takes a little bit of time, but if you do it consistently, it's just going to stick and you're going to be using it the whole time. Now, the other function of the pen tool is when you work with automation, and this is where it really shines. So I'm going to be maybe going right there. Just going to make the clip a little bit longer, and I'm going to make it longer right here. So if I do some automation, I'm going to go there. We can see that we can do some automation on the volume. So this really shines when we do automation. So if I do it with the arrow tool, it sucks because every time that we go and create a point, we are going to need to create a new point, then move it around and just go there and just maybe go there. And it's just very time consuming because maybe what you just want to do, you just want to maybe create a kind of a sine wave, or you want to do something very specific. So this is where you want to use the pen tool. Instead of just clicking and adjusting the points, you just can drag whatever the F you want. And then when you release it, it's just going to do it for you. So when you go to MIDI, the pen tool is really important because if you want to edit notes, notice that here that we get the same tools that we've been using. So the pen tool, becomes a different tool, not just for automation. So all of these tools are just very specific. So if I maybe go right there, we just maybe don't have a pen tool, but if I go to the pen tool right there, we can maybe go right there. I just can draw something right here on this automation, on this expression. So we are going to be talking about expressions much later. But instead of just creating it with the pointer, which is boring as F, like going right there, adding the point, and right there, just doing it manually, it sucks. You can just go right here, use the pen tool, and just do it. It's going to just do it for you. So we're going to be talking about this much later. All right, so let me just go back to this clip. Right, so now we need to talk about the eraser tool and the knife tool. And these ones are pretty much like the pen tool. They do something very specific. So let me just give you an example. Let's say I want to select some parts of this MIDI and I just want to delete them, right? That's what I want to do. So we can go to the arrow. I'm going to be selecting this. I'm going to be going to the backspace. I'm going to do, delete it. I'm going to go there, select this portion, just delete it, just go there, delete it, and then go there and delete it. So we can easily do this, with the pointer tool. But the thing is that we are doing many, many things. Selecting, just going to the delete and pressing a key. Doing the same thing and pressing a key. Doing the same thing and pressing a key. And if you have to do this multiple times, it just gets, it's just not that good. You're doing a lot of more things than you're supposed to do. Because you can easily do this by tapping the number 4 and going to that tool. So now what you can do, you can select, and I'm dragging right now. I'm left clicking and dragging. You can just select this and kaboom, it's gone. You just don't need to use the arrow and then do delete, right? You can easily do it with just like this. And it's just a lot quicker and a lot easier. Also, what you can do, what if you want to chop something and then maybe you want to delete some parts? So the eraser can do that. Let me maybe stand right here. Maybe I just want to split right here. Just by clicking is going to split the clip. So yeah, remember all the tools, they share functions. In this case, we are using the eraser as a knife tool. We are just chopping the clip. Now, let me just go back. Now, the other one, it's going to be pretty simple. It's the knife tool. And as you could assume, with the knife tool, we are just going to be splitting things up. Now, let's say I want to go right here and split it. Kaboom, we split the clip. Now, what if you start, doing the selection of whatever you want to chop, but you made a mistake and maybe you want to correct it? Well, you can just move, and I'm still, doing left click. I'm holding the left click. You just can move the pointer and just adjust whatever is that you're going to be splitting. Because right now we are just very far, but maybe you just want to split on a very specific position. So maybe just, by not releasing the left click, you just can adjust whatever your chopping is going to be. Now, remember, we are snapping to the grid. If you do shift, you're going to be able to freely move and chop whatever you want. Maybe I want to chop it right here so we get no pops. So there you go. Just going to split it right there. Right. So there's one more cool thing. I'm going to need to do something like this because if not, you're not going to see it. So it depends on your grid quantization, on your grid, actually. What you can do, you can chop on multiple parts. So I'm going to be starting to chop. But what you need to do, you need to hold the Alt. So I'm going to be holding the Alt, and I'm going to be starting to chop. And I'm not doing this manually. I'm just holding the Alt. And whatever grid we have on the bottom, notice that it's just chopping the clip to whatever grid we have on the bottom. So this depends on your grid. Right now we are 1/16, so it's just going to chop it like that. And the only thing we did is just to hold Alt and then kind of paint whatever is that we want to chop. On this one, we're going to be doing the same thing. So it's a really, really useful tool, especially if you want to, work with the audio or the MIDI clip and really kind of adjust it or change it. So let me just go back and zoom right there so we can see what's going on. So right there in the back, we have a grid, right? So if I stand right there, it's just kind of syncing to that part of the grid. If I go over there, it's syncing there, and it's syncing here. So if we do Control and Shift, Alt and Shift, we know that this is going to be chopping on the 16s, right? So maybe I just don't want to snap to the grid. Maybe I just want to use the grid, but start on an offset spot. So let me just go back. Right now, we know that this is going to do it on the grid. But now if we do Alt, but if we do Shift at the same time, it's going to do the same thing, but we can decide when we start chopping and it will still use the same grid with the same quantization. The only difference is that we start whatever we want and we are not starting to cut on whatever point we have in the grid. So yeah, it's just a little bit different. Right here, I cannot choose when I start cutting. But in the other one, when you do Shift, you can choose when you start cutting, and then you're going to do whatever quantization you have right there at the bottom. All right, so we are done. Now, this is the most basic usage of the tools that we have available. We have right here. Remember that whenever you work with something, you always can do right click and find a lot of other things that you can do. And even if you go right here at the top, you have more options right there. Now I'm going to be covering on the next, on the upcoming videos on this, on the next couple of weeks. I'm going to be releasing a lot of videos from Bitwig, and I'm going to be explaining all of this, talking about the, the scaling, how this works, talking about how we can work with out of fades and crossfades and fades in overall. I'm going to be talking about clips, mid clips, and all the things that we have on the arranger right here on the inspector. So yeah, I'm gonna be covering a lot of ground. Alright, so if you like this guide, you like this video, remember to like and subscribe. And if you have the money and you want to buy me a coffee, you can. Go to the links at the description. You have links for PayPal, you have the YouTube thanks, or maybe you can go to Patreon and be a 1-month patron. Alright, so see you on the next one. And the next one is going to be clips, talking about clips and the audio events. When we go right here, when we go to an audio clip, we can see that we have a clip right there. But if I double click, then we have more things. And all of this is just a little bit confusing, because we have a clip view, we have a track view, and then we have a container right here, and I can move this. So what the F is going on? So we're going to be talking about all of this. All right, so see you on the next one.